Good afternoon folks from Pipers'Persuasion, Alan Hamilton again, and we're at a very grand home in the west end of Glasgow, and we're looking out onto Hughenden Rugby Club, I do believe. It's the home of Joe Noble, one of the most famous drummers in the world.
Do you want to do that again?
No, I like these jokes about pipers and drummers because Joe is very much a supporter of piping, as you will learn. He's got lots of other vibrant ideas about how tunes should be played, and has given plenty of advice to those that will listen over the years. So we're going to have an enjoyable conversation with Joe Noble now, who will tell us where he's from, etc. I mentioned off camera just a second or two ago that you were from Fraserburgh, and I think we'll just start there. When you were born, Fraserburgh, your early days, was it drumming or was it some other thing? What took you onto drumming? Who were your influences, etc.?
Well, there's a whole bundle of questions.
Correct.
That's good. That's right. I was born in Fraserburgh, so that means I'm a brocher, and very proud of it. I was born in the war years, and then was up in Fraserburgh until I was 7 years old.
7 years of age, huh?
7 years, yeah. My father worked in the Press and Journal newspaper, and then moved down. The family were moved down to Glasgow because of his work, and he ultimately worked for the Daily Record. From the sublime to the ridiculous.
Right, okay.
And when we came down here at the tender age of 7, the family settled in Dumbarton Road in Whiteinch, which was just across from Gordon Park Church, which was the home of the 214 Boys Brigade.
So it was a natural progression. You weren't travelling, you were straight in there.
Natural progression. Whenever I heard the pipe band playing, which was the first pipe band that I'd actually heard playing, I was hooked. That was me.
Excellent.
And then into the Life Boys, and my ideal would have been to have been a piper. That's what I had set out to be. I mean, lots of people know this, but I left the house to go to the BB to learn to be a piper. But unknown to me, Alec McIver had asked that all the new recruits had to be tried out for drumming potential, because we were losing 2 drummers at the end of this next year, and that left us only with 2 snare drummers, and you need 3. In those days you needed 3 to play at all grade levels.
Yes.
And I was tested for that, and had some kind of aptitude, and then I was slipped the Queen's shilling when Alex said, "Well, son, it'll take you at least 3 years to get into the band if you're a piper, but we're going to put you in a programme that will get you in the band next year." So that was me. So I sold my soul. And
just for a quick buck. Yeah.
That was it. That was it. And in the 214, I was very, very fortunate to be in the 214, because the teaching methods that they had, and the instructors that they had available to the band were absolutely top class.
Who were they?
Well, go to the piping first of all. The pipers, they would start off with Alec Ibell. Alec Ibell was the man who started off Ian McClellan.
Yeah.
And Alec would take the raw recruits, teach them the chanter, get them onto a half set of pipes, get them marching about 1 or 2 of the band tunes, and then would pass them on to the next hall, where it was Dan Finlay.
Yeah.
Dan Finlay would progress this whole system, get them onto a full set of bagpipes, pass them on to the next hall, Joe King.
Okay.
Now, many of the people who are, in fact I think the vast majority of people who are listening to this don't know these names, but they were hugely important in the teaching process. Dan is still teaching. Dan was related to John Finlay, who sadly passed away just recently.
Yes.
After that, after Joe King had done his bit, he would put them into the big hall. Alec, there's another boy for you. And Alec would take them into the band, and on we would go from there. On the drumming side, it was more face-to-face. And the tutor was a fellow called George Hunter. Now, George Hunter was a superb player in his own right.
A good player, eh?
Oh, aye.
Did he play? Who did he play with?
Well, at that time he was the flank drummer for the Renfrew Pipe Band.
Okay.
And he later became leading drummer of the Red Hackle Band. And then
I remember him. Aye, I was in the Red Hackle when he was there.
Aye.
Aye.
So
That was in the 60s.
You might be right. Yes.
Aye.
And then he went on. I think he played with Mulgai. He did. He played with Mulgai. I think he was a leading drummer of the Mulgai band that won the World Grade 2 some years ago, a long time ago. But anyway, that was George. I was also receiving instruction from the leading drummer of the juvenile band, who was Andy Hosey. Now Andy and I were,
as well.
oh, Andy and I were very good pals. He was a wee bit older than me. Got to underline that. Hopefully he'll be watching this just to remind him he's a wee bit older than me.
Aye.
And he was a tremendous player. And when he left the band, I became leading drummer.
Okay.
And I followed him up to the Renfrew, and he became leading drummer of the Renfrew, won the World Drum Corps Championship in Grade 1 with Andy's leading drummer.
Yeah.
So I had him, but that wasn't all. Because I was on a rushed through kind of style of thing.
Fast track.
Fast track, that's a good term. I was sent to Alec Healy, who was a leading drummer of the Renfrew, a world solo drumming champion, and Alec was absolutely brilliant. Superb player. He would teach you your drumming, and he had a twin brother who became the pipe major of the band for
That's Jimmy Healy.
Jimmy Healy.
Aye.
And if you spoke to Jimmy, he would talk to you about drumming. And if you spoke to Alec, he would talk to you about piping. And it was a good thing, because they were so interested in the whole pipe band ethos.
Which is an important thing.
Yeah, and this was years ago, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, this was before ensemble, or before ensemble was introduced as an adjudication consideration. But they were talking ensemble. All the good players you find, away far, far back, from what I can gather, although they didn't use the word, that was the language they spoke. They spoke
Yes.
about bands.
Yes.
And the overall band sound. They weren't limited to their own little group.
And the switched on pipe majors took that on as well.
Of course, yeah. So that was me through the BB and then into.
They got a lot of prizes there.
The 214
Yeah.
won everything. I mean, juvenile. We kind of dominated the juvenile grade for a wee while. I don't keep a record of such things, but I know we won everything. And more than once, let's say,
It doesn't
2 or 3
it's
times.
just quite boring to listen to the results because it was 214.
Well, yeah, it was better in a way that when you played out the grade, and they did well out the grade. I think in my time, when you were allowed to play in other grades at championships, the band actually played out and played in grade 3 and grade 2 at championships other than the Worlds in Cowell. And we won. I know the band won the British grade 2 title, and we won the Scottish grade 3 and the European grade 3. I don't know how many prizes, I don't count prizes, but first prizes, there was that.
Yeah.
And again, I think as a member of the 214, we were more worried about the local battalion championship. That was the big one. We're worried about that because they'd won it, I think they eventually won it something like 27 years in a row. And it's the kind of thing that when you're a boy and you're in there, you realise you can't really win this, you're only there to get beat. And,
so first port Glasgow couldn't come
well,
in.
no, the first port, they didn't come into the equation, perhaps happily, because it was a Glasgow battalion thing. And it was run by the Glasgow Highland Club. And the trophy is still going. Because now it's competed for by schools. Sadly, the BB has demised as far as being able to produce pipe bands is concerned, and a number of competitive pipe bands certainly in the Glasgow area. But that was one where Alec used to have extra practices for that one, and you went on with 6 pipers, a bass drum and 2 snare drummers. And it used to be quite funny because we would turn up and this shield was in a wooden box, and it would be handed over to the battalion supervisor, who in those days was Bob McCreth.
I know Bob.
Bob was a lovely man who was very, very important in the Boys Brigade movement, and also very important in the pipe band movement.
Secretary of Pipe Band Association.
He was indeed. I think he was. Latterly, he was a president.
Yes.
President of the Pipe Band Association.
Very well spoken man.
Well spoken.
I think he was a lawyer, was he not? Was he not a solicitor?
I haven't a clue.
I think it was.
I haven't a clue.
Yeah, I think it was.
He was a thorough gentleman.
Yes.
And which is strange when you pass over this box, because we were there, and Alec would pass over the box, and he'd say, "Thanks, Alec. I'll see you round the back after the competition to give you the box back." And you know, you thought, well, that's tempting Providence a wee bit, you know. But anyway, luckily while I was there, we were fortunate enough to get away with it. I was part of this great big 27-year span. I had only a wee bit in the middle somewhere. But yeah, that was that. Then on to the Renfrew. The Renfrew, I could honestly say that was my band. I think I was destined to play in the Renfrew.
Great band.
It was a great band, an unsponsored band, and the guys who played for Renfrew wanted to play for Renfrew.
That's right.
And I think there was a kind of family atmosphere about the band.
I remember they had a flag day once a year, and you went round the shops with your cans. And
it was a flag week, and then culminating in a flag day. And you used
to
go round
and
and shake the can.
Graham's behind the camera here.
Right.
He played with the Renfrew as well. He remembers that.
So these are
in the streets of Renfrew.
So we're fortunate here. We've got 3 Renfrew devotees. But yeah, we had to survive by our own efforts, and it made for a good band. I think it did anyway. I don't think anything's tasted quite as nice as the big pot of mince at the back of the bus at Cowell with the grass in it. I mean, I think if you don't put a wee handful of grass and mince, it doesn't really taste the same. But now it's all, you know, which restaurant shall we go to?
Tommy Anderson was the pipe major.
Tommy Anderson was the pipe major, learned bundles from Tommy.
Great musician, Tommy.
Oh, I know that many people have said he's probably the best pipe major never to have won the World Championship.
I thought it was the finest pipe major I ever played with.
Well,
because he had a handful of boys there, and he just moulded the resources into a band. And he didn't have any stars, but he did extremely well.
He had the ability to turn a sow's ear into a silk purse.
Yeah.
He would take a bunch of boys, as you say, and they could all blow. You know, so the band was always a well-tuned band, and musically he gave it a lot. When I was in that band, at one stage, Ian McClellan, when he came back from the army, just prior to him joining the police, Ian was a pipe sergeant in the band.
Yeah.
And I remember Ian saying to me that, I think he said this to me anyway, that it sticks in my mind, that the setting that the police played for Hugh Kennedy, which was one of the police big star tunes when Ian was pipe major, was actually the setting that he'd got from Tommy Anderson.
That's true, and also the Young McGregor.
Young
Tommy deducted 1 or 2 notes in Young McGregor, and the police played both these marches to great advantage over the years and won many prizes. And that was Tommy Anderson's sort of set
yeah,
up.
Tommy was extremely good. And then I played under Tommy for, I don't know how long, but some years, and with great success. At that stage, when I went in initially, it was Andy who was the leading drummer, and then Andy left, and I became the leading drummer. And it was moderately successful at that time. But I think I'd maybe jumped onto the let's chase the drumming prize thing. Because I remember my kind of road to Damascus, if you want to put it like that, experience was when A.D. Hamilton, I was introduced to A.D. Hamilton, or should I say, A.D. introduced himself to me, and it was at the back of the band bus at Ballochie one year, and A.D. came up while I was putting my drum away into the bag and what have you, and said that Joe Noble, you know who I am? I said, yeah, A.D. Hamilton. And he says, how deeply do you think about music? How do you read and write music? And I said, well, I do after a fashion, which was true. But it was if you get English, what we were doing was pidgin English.
I can admit it.
Aye. So he said, well, you don't really. And I said, yeah, and I think a lot of the players at that time played by ear.
Yes.
And A.D. said, well, I think I could help you. I think I could maybe improve you. And I said, yeah, fine. You know, kind of very flippant about it, you know, just a young buck. And I had said to Alec that I stayed in Bears Den, and so did he. So he said, well, ideal. He says, why don't you come along to the house next Monday, 8 o'clock, whatever it was. I think it was 8 o'clock. And I said, that's fine. Well, I was just newly married at that time, and I remember saying to my wife, I says, I'm just going to nip along. It's about 7:45. I'm just going to nip along. I'll get the sticks out, I'll blow this old wagon away, and that'll be it. Well, the reverse was
So what was his background? I don't want to take you away from that story, we'll come back to that evening, but just to give the viewers an essence
A.D. Hamilton was, he had a pipe band background, military Sea Force.
Okay.
But his real background was in classical music, and he was a percussionist in what was probably the forerunner of the Scottish National Orchestra.
Right.
But he would play in, I mean, this man was an old man when I met him, and his drumming experience went way back to the 20s and what have you. So he would play in orchestra pits, you know, for the movies.
Right.
You know, when you do all the special effects. Oh, here's the train coming, bang, crash, wallop, all this kind of thing. So that must have been fun. But he had all of that background, but a very, very into classical music. And just to briefly go back to that night.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got there at 8, and I think I got home about 1 in the morning. And I went back there religiously every Monday night for a long, long time. And to say he opened doors for me is an understatement. I didn't even see the doors, you know. He showed me the doors before, you know, I went through them. We did quite a bit of pipe band work, you know, analysing drum scores and watching how they fitted to the tune, etc. The whole construction, which was, you know, how it should always be, you know. So I went over that. But the music I listened to was, his favourite composer was Beethoven.
Right.
AD was really into classical music, heavily into classical music. That was his scene. And we listened to a lot of classical music, where again he would outline construction and stuff. And one of the passages I remember he used to give me was the snare part to Ravel's Bolero, which is not difficult to play, but it's extremely difficult to sustain, and it's a real test for a drummer, because you're playing fundamentally the same thing for a long, long time with different dynamics, etc. And for a pipe band drummer in particular, it's very difficult because we're used to showing off, and it doesn't suit us, our inner self, to play the same thing all, you know, on. But this was a good exercise.
Improve your concentration levels.
It's a good exercise in discipline, and I would suggest that drummers should have a go at that. But anyway, from there, still while I was at Renfrew, the Renfrew band became the British Caledonian Airways Renfrew type band. We picked up a sponsorship, and then that sponsorship was changed. We became the Babcock's Renfrew pipe band, always with Renfrew in it, and I left at that point. But although I'd only played in the one band, I'd played with several pipe majors. Tommy Anderson, there was Tom McPherson, Willie Connell, Robert Stewart,
right,
and Ian MacLeod, latterly Ian MacLeod, who used to be
of
pipe
Edinburgh
major
City Police.
of Edinburgh City Police fame. And it was interesting because although he only played with one band, you got quite an input from all these guys who all had their own interests and different views on the way our music should be played. So it was quite interesting because you've got to provide some kind of accompaniment to just putting down the notes. That's one thing, but it's how you play the notes is the all-important thing.
Did you have a conversation with these individual pipe majors as over the years and what tunes that were going to be played for the next season?
Yeah.
And they build something between the two of you that would produce a pipe band effect?
Oh, yes, very much so. Probably more with Tommy Anderson than any other one. Tommy it was great working with Tommy because he would give you the tunes, he would give you, there it is, there's the written tune, and there it is on tape. He always played the tune at the tempo that he would like it played during the summer, and that's very important, you know. When you get a kind of slow laboured chanter delivery, all you're doing is just learning the note sequence. You're not getting the nuances of how he wants it played, and some of the little phrasing.
And the tempos are really paramountly important for a drummer when you come to constructing your music.
Yeah.
Because if you're playing what you've constructed at a much lower pace, and what you've done is rubbish.
It doesn't work. It's like asking the pipers to play a tune very, very slow. The fingers don't bounce. Well, the same thing with the drumsticks don't bounce, and it becomes laboured. The whole thing becomes laboured, and it might be accurate note-wise. It might be accurate, but musically, it's bankrupt, you know.
There's no dynamics or
there's
anything.
no life. There's no life to it. So it's important that you know what tempos and that you're going to play. And he was always good at coming up with that kind of idea, and would sit down. I would come up with a drum score, would sit down, don't like that, but he'd say, what are you trying to do? Tell me what you're trying to do. Aye, but I don't want that. So he's always going to have the last say. He's got to. He's a bit major. And it was great because we worked very, very well together. Very interesting when Willie Connell was a pipe major. Willie had quite an interesting way of doing phrasing, and I mean it was always pertinent to the tune that you were playing. That there was a lot of bands at that period played what I would call two-bar phrasing. It's question and answer, you know, you do this, you do that, you do that, you do that. And they're balanced, it's fine. But it's a wee bit boring, you know.
Aye.
And when you get the phrasing where you maybe get an 8-bar measure, it'll be, right, I want that half bar, I want that stressed, and you want that, and then the rest just balances out, you go on to the next thing, and there would be different interpretations all the way through. So he was very good for that also. But all these guys, as I say, they were all very, very interesting and all very talented. I mean Ian MacLeod is a tremendous record as a pipe major.
Yes.
A tremendous record as a solo player.
A good solo player.
So,
great all-round knowledge, really.
yeah. So again, you can only learn from guys like that. Then I left the band. I was going to have what was called a sabbatical. I think that's what the term would be. Which lasted only about 3 or 4 months. And I was asked if I would come down and join the Toyota pipe band with Hugh McInnes as pipe major.
Interesting guy as well, Hugh.
Very interesting guy. Hugh could only talk to you about pipes.
That's it.
You see, I mean, we're sitting here today and all the news is about a future royal wedding. You wouldn't have been interested in at all, you know. I mean, if you'd said to him, well, what do you think of that? Is a royal wedding on? They say, very good, aye. See that tune, you know, he just had no interest in anything else that happened outside. He was totally, that was his currency, bagpipes.
Can I ask you a question about Hugh? I know Hugh is away now, sadly. But I know that when he practiced 2/4 marches, for instance, for solo, he would do the same tune 6 times in a row. And if he made a mistake in the 4th time round, he would just start again. That was his first time round again. And that would drive folk mental, you know. The question I'm addressing to you, was it like that with the pipe band practices?
No, it wasn't. It couldn't be, because I mean, when you're not dealing with 12 Hugh McInneses, you never get home, you know. But no, he knew the way the tune. He wanted the tunes to be played. He was a stickler for good finger work. Yeah. And no harm in that, you know. And always
very, very committed man, though.
Totally. I mean, I could have said that if Hugh McInnes was alive today and he walked in here with a pipe case, I would guarantee if he opened the pipe case and put the pipes up, he would be going like that.
All the time.
All the time, everywhere, all the time. You know, he was really excellent on that line. And that was it. The band then changed the city of Glasgow, and that was me time for the off. I had too many irons in the fire. I'd stopped enjoying it.
Yeah.
Really.
So when you did that, was that around about the time you started with the band room, or had you?
Well, the band room had already started. The band room had already started prior to me. You know, I think I had the band room maybe for about 5-6 years while I was still playing.
Okay,
Like that time.
so what was your background, just coming away from piping and drum for a second or two, your background professionally leading up to you opening the band room?
Well, I started from school, I went into insurance and I worked through the ranks of insurance. I'd always shown an interest in surveying, and I became a surveyor for an insurance company, specialising in security and latterly in fire and security. But at one point, I'd worked for a firm called Eagle Star, which is now swallowed up by the Zurich Group. But at one point, I was senior security surveyor for Scotland, Northern Britain and Northern Ireland.
Okay.
I quite enjoyed it, and I started the band room while I was still there, almost as a hobby and afterthought, because
some hobby.
there had been a shop that I'd dealt with called Bradley's, and they'd sadly gone out of business. And you know how you look at something, you say, I could do that.
Aye.
You know, I'll give that a go.
Uh-huh.
So, always thinking, this will be a wee job for me for when I hang up my clipboard and pencil, you know.
Yes, yes.
And it just got so big that
it was in West Regent Street in Glasgow.
It was in West Regent Street. It was at number 97 to 99 initially, and then we went up the road to 174 West Regent Street, much larger premises,
okay.
Something like 4 times the size of the other premises, and the business was very successful.
Tell people what you sold and who worked with you.
Well, what was sold, it was always, started off as drums. Now, not just pipe band drums, it was drum kits, orchestral items, and all the bits and pieces that go with percussion. But because of the pipe band connection, it was always going to be a leap into to pipes, etc. And not being a piper, as I already said very sadly, you need expertise. So a lifelong friend of mine was about to retire from the Strathclyde Police, that was Ian McClellan, and Ian very kindly agreed to come in, and we worked there quite happily for a number of years.
That's excellent. It really was.
We had a great,
and you
relationship.
sold Highland ware as well.
It was all Highland ware and bagpipes and related products.
Right. And you sold everybody's product, and it was fine. You know.
Oh, we didn't commit ourselves to, we didn't tie ourselves into, just let's say for example, one manufacturer of drums.
Yeah,
My attitude was in that respect was that if somebody made it, then somebody would probably want it, so we'll sell it.
Aye.
As long as we got
and the market's big enough for everybody anyway.
Yeah, the market is quite big enough for everyone. Some of the people who were involved with some of the manufacturing companies didn't quite see it like that. Sometimes they took umbrage, you could say, at the fact that you'd be selling somebody else's product. But I remember saying to one managing director of a company, fine, I'll only sell your product. You give me the sole rights in Scotland to sell your product. Oh, we can't do that. I said, well, doing that.
Excellent.
But that developed and ran the business for 16, 17 years. My wife became ill and sold the business rather quickly. And in the interim period, I'd stopped playing and moved on to the adjudication panel. In the interim period, I'd stopped playing and moved on to the adjudication panel.
Okay.
And that's where I remain, in the adjudication panel.
And that's interesting too, because you have brought a lot of your background knowledge of piping, because you are avidly interested in piping as well as drumming. So explain that to the viewer, and explain also the ensemble, when and why that kicked in.
I just love the way you ask it. You throw, it's about 3 words, and it demands about 3 million words in response.
Let's fall asleep for that far.
My interest in piping, I've always had an interest in piping, and I've become more interested in it as the years have gone on. I enjoy going to the solo piping competitions, very much so. I think the solo piping competitions are really where you hear the tunes produced technically and musically the way they were intended.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important, to have that knowledge. You also learn the tunes by going to a piping competition. Dare I say it, that when you go to a drumming competition, you would only think there had been 24 matches written since the start of time. Right. And it's this idea that everybody desperately requires to play a 6-part march, and there are only so many of them. And ignoring all these fabulous 4-part marches, which are, by the way, more technically and musically demanding of a drummer, and maybe that's why they don't want to play some of the 4-part marches.
Okay.
Because some of the 4-part marches are extremely interesting the way they're constructed.
And there's complete changes in each part.
Right. So I think that's just the way of things, I'm afraid. But it's much more enjoyable to maybe go to, let's say, the Glenfiddich competition. Once you've finished tuning up, that is. And
well, that's another
I know that's another and then you'll get them to play, you'll get 10 players playing, you'll get 10 different marches.
Yes.
If you go to the solos, you might get 10 guys playing, and you get 3 different marches.
Aye, the drums, aye.
The solo drumming, sorry.
Aye.
So I think it gives you a more variable and a better balanced listen than other competitions. But I just enjoy it. I enjoy the whole idea of it. The adjudication is different. They don't have this ranking system which we have. I mean, our ranking system demands that we place everyone from first to last, and then nail it on the wall so that everybody can see who was first and who was last. I think that's an unfortunate way of doing things. This is a personal viewpoint.
Yes.
I think that whilst I appreciate if that bands need to move up and down the ranking, the grading system, I don't think it does much good, to have a public whipping every Saturday.
No.
You could have a band having a bad day, a real bad day at the office, and people will look at the fact that they're down there, whereas if you're not on the prize list, then that's it. And of course the same thing happens in solo drumming. They seem to demand this first to last, and that's what's wanted, so that's what we do. But I must say I feel sorry, particularly for the kids. I do feel sorry. I don't think it...
Because everybody's trying their best, aren't they?
I don't think it does anybody any good, particularly for a youngster, to be placed last or close to last. I think if you're not in the prizes, that's okay. Today wasn't your day. Tonight, with a different judge, might have been a different result, and that's what I wish people would think along those lines. It's not like an edict from above that he's last, so he's always going to be last. Of course not. And I think if we manage to get out of that, I'm digressing a wee bit here.
That's
but
okay.
but it is a thing that
It's an important point, and that's what I'm here about, to bring out points that might engender future discussion, and that's the whole point of the exercise.
Yeah.
Ensemble.
Ensemble, yeah. Well, ensemble is quite simply just the art of drawing things together and making it pleasant to the listener. It's drawing various components together so that they all work to one end. And that doesn't always mean to say that you do the same thing to get there. You know, you don't slavishly, like a drum corps doesn't slavishly follow every dot and cut that the piper
And
plays.
pipe score, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if the best way of describing it is again to listen to an orchestra, classical orchestra, or even a choir, where you get different groups singing different things, but it's all washing over into one big finished article. That's my view on ensemble. I think that I mean, a lot of guys think that a drummer, you shouldn't be doing ensemble. You're not a piper, you shouldn't be doing ensemble. That's a fair comment. I think, dare I say it, that it's almost easier for a drummer to do ensemble than it is for a piper to do ensemble. Because
from a piper's angle, most of the pipers, the drummers are just a noise at the back end of the band, and they haven't got a clue what's going on there.
yeah, that's
and it's just something that's interrupting their.
You're enjoying the tune.
No, but it gets so biased and everything else, and it's refreshing, I find, to have conversation with pipers and drummers, understand what's going on in a pipe band. And I think it's still a hangover of from the days, generations ago, where pipers just learned to play pipes. Nowadays, a lot of the youngsters have learned to play other instruments and have got a better understanding of music.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. I'm hugely encouraged when I speak to some of the young guys nowadays that they are getting a more balanced and broader view on our music, and it's not just, blinkers on, this is the way you do it. I mean, but we're looking at two instruments. You've got the bagpipe, where you're always getting a sound from the bagpipe.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you do,
Yeah.
you're always getting a sound from it. The drone's always there, you can play notes. There's no intermission between the sounds.
And there's no emphasis either, because it's a level sound.
You move to the drum, which is the ultimate staccato instrument, where the only continuous sound you get in a drum is a roll, a closed roll. And so you've got this inbred difference. Now, a lot of the drummers think because the pipers are playing all the time, we've got to play all the time. And it doesn't work out like that. That can become, really boring, and it becomes too packed, and it just doesn't work. And often when you things that stick in your mind as good things that bands play, it's quite often that the drummers have actually have had a rest, a half a bar rest to make an emphasis, and then come in and use of dynamics and simplistic ideas instead of constantly trying to prove how clever you are.
And it provides colour to the performance also.
Well, it does.
Yeah.
The drum can provide the dynamic that the pipe finds it difficult to do.
Yeah.
It can produce a form of dynamic, but it can't actually vary it's the actual pitch and the level that you're playing at, short of half a dozen pipers cutting out and coming back in, you know. But from a band perspective, to get back to the bit I was saying about it, I think it should be, or could be easier for a drummer to become an ensemble guy, because his job has always been to listen to the bagpipe.
Yes.
Because the drummer's job, in its simple, its most simple form, you have to keep time, you have to keep tempo, and you have to accompany. And that is for all drummers, and, you know, pipe bands, flute bands, accordion bands, dance bands, etc., etc., etc. That's what you do. That's your job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all the other bits, the technique, the dynamics, all of the clever embellishments, etc., that's all extra. But those are the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're pushing your technique to the degree that you've overshadowed what you're supposed to be accompanying, then you've actually failed.
Yeah.
And if you're having to drag a tempo down to make sure that you can show off what you can play, you failed again.
Of course.
You know, so these are fundamentals, and that, I mean, I would apply those same considerations if I was judging drumming. When I'm judging drumming as, you know, just judging the drum corps,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just listening to the drum corps. How on earth can you just listen to the drum corps? How can you, you know, say that I don't want to listen to that half of the band? You can't do that. You're listening to the drummers, or the drum corps' input to that band, and did they do their job? Did they enhance the performance by their attendance, or were they just an irritation? You know, so.
Couple of points just on drum corps. Earlier in the conversation, you alluded to 3 drummers, bass drum, or 3 drummers, 4 drummers, 2 tenors and a bass. We're into a big numbers game now.
We're into huge numbers.
Your views on large numbers of side drummers, 6 tenor drummers, a bass, maybe 2 bass.
Yeah.
Where have we gone?
You tell me. I don't know. They say that we're in a recession. Where are we getting all the money?
That's big buses, isn't it? There's actually more drummers. They put it in the back end of the behind the bus where they can make all the noise, and the pipers with a wee whiskey.
I'm not going to get into this. No, I think that if you looked at the issue of big bands, if that's what people want, then that's what will be done, irrespective of what other people think.
Of course.
I don't think that going onto a field with 25 pipers or whatever is going to give you a better musical effect than going on with 16 pipers, perhaps blowing a bigger sound.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe stress that.
Yes.
I think I might be accused of getting into an area which is not my domain, but years ago, I think the guys probably blew more stable reeds,
Mm-hmm.
because they broke them in a certain way.
Yes.
Nowadays, if a breath of cold air passes over the contest field, 10 pipers drop out. You know?
Right.
So you're dealing, I think, to get that kind of level, with you can be introducing a lack of stability.
There's a lot of instant sound out there. Reeds lasting 3 weeks, and giving up these reeds for the next championship and certain championship and new reed and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, I can't go into that. But
That aside, that aside, what about the 10 side drums?
Well, I don't see the benefit of it. It's become a numbers game. I've spoken to some young lads who say, "Oh, we couldn't go out this Saturday, we only had 5 snare drummers." I said, "Well, that's perfect, that's ideal." I mean, my perfect size of drum corps, personally speaking, is 7. I think that gives you the opportunities to give all the thickness of sound that you require, and also could be balanced against a reasonable sized pipe corps.
Okay.
I mean, I've judged and given prizes to drum corps who've been out there with 10 snare drummers, and I take my hat off to them, because how they can hold their attention levels and inward concentration to play so well together
Yes.
is quite extraordinary.
It's almost like an accident waiting to happen, isn't it?
Well, all you need, it could be like dominoes, you know, if somebody goes out, then bang, 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 you know, you could get, you know, if somebody goes out close to the middle, then this side could lose a wee bit of synchronisation. But I think, you know, you've got to watch the tones you're setting. Sometimes the drums have become a wee bit too insipid, you know, they're not a full sound. But just think about it from the logistic problems of adjudicating a band that comes out like that, or a series of bands that come out like that. The rightly or wrongly, the player and the public, and everyone for that matter, expects the adjudicators to be pretty accurate in everything they do.
Yeah.
Now, that's a reasonable expectation, and I can assure you that the adjudicators try their best to do that.
Yeah.
But if you think back to a time when you had 4 adjudicators adjudicating at ground level, where a band had 12 pipers, 2 tenors, a bass, and say 5 snare drummers, you could pretty well, from almost any fixed position, get the whole flavour of the band.
Right.
Now, when you put on this multitude, and you haven't increased the number of adjudicators, I think there could be mayhem going on over there, and you can't expect this guy over here to hear it.
That's right.
So there's a lot of discussion in the pipe band game and the adjudication panel just now about the possibilities of fixed point adjudication, and also for elevating the adjudicators so they can get an overview of the band. I mean, anyone who's attended the World Championship as a spectator will appreciate the advantage they have of listening to a band, because you can be slightly higher,
yes,
3, 4, half a dozen rows up, and you get an overview of the band.
Yeah.
Other forms of competitive music do it similarly. They can think of that. I can think of the Albert Hall, where they could be sitting higher, and the band's playing on the platform,
they
or
do it in
DCI, where they're
doing it in Brittany.
Aye.
There are 13 judges in the audience, high up,
Yeah.
and they seem to get a much easier time with the results.
You see, it is something. It's an ongoing debate. I mean, we're now in a situation where at the last World Championship, I can't remember the precise numbers, but we're looking at between 240 and 250 pipe bands. I well remember the first time the World Championship had 100 bands.
And that was enough.
And everybody thought, wow, this is fabulous, this is fantastic. You know, 100 bands at the World Pipe Band Championship, never 2.5 times that. And I'm certainly not one for reducing it. I think it's fabulous that these bands come from all over the world. It's a huge compliment to our music that bands from different cultures, different parts of the world are prepared to devote their time, money and efforts to playing our music. I think that's a huge compliment to our music. I don't see it as any kind of infiltration or an unwelcome aspect at all. I think it's fantastic. I think it's great to see bands coming from all those areas, and I would encourage them.
Before India called again, which was entirely fortuitous, I was trying to drag you into talking about bass sections in bands, which just over the last season or two have developed quite radically. And just a comment.
Okay. I think it's interesting the way the bass section has developed. I think it's good to see so many young people, certainly an awful lot of girls involved in tenor drumming, gets involved in pipe bands. My big question would always be, how does this enhance the overall musical performance? Now, I think it's important to see how the bass sections are composed, how you'll have the bass drummer, you could have 3 tenors, 4 tenors, some a lot more than that, going up to 8 tenors. Personally, I think that's maybe slightly over the top, but as long as these players are skilled enough and the instruments are tuned well enough, then yes, there is a place for them. I just get a bit concerned that the bands in some of the lower grades who will try to mimic this don't really give it the consideration which it is due. I know that it's been tried before. Many years ago, I've seen bands, played against bands, and judged bands who have had more than one bass drummer. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. I don't think it's not my cup of tea, it's not my cup of tea personally, but again, as long as it works musically. I like to think that a bass drum is the heartbeat of the band.
Okay.
It doesn't only provide the kind of metronome type balance for the band, but it gives you, it's almost like a filling sound, it's like an additional tone almost. It's a well-tuned bass drum should have a slight sustain on it, melts into the band, doesn't just bop, finish one note. And I think when you play many instruments, to give the second instrument its place, sometimes you've got to stop your note from sustaining. I think that the best way to describe what a good, well-tuned bass drum can do to a band is ask everyone to cast their mind back to the last time they went to a band practice where the bass drummer couldn't make it for some reason, and the band's empty.
Yeah.
Or else the bass drummer arrives slightly later. The old days it would be because they were in shifts or whatever, but they would arrive at the band practice and they'd get the bass drum out and they would kind of wander into the band and start playing it. And suddenly the band had a different sound. It was part of the overall band sound.
So, I'm smiling here. Bands with the bass drums. Do you remember when we played with their entry and Tommy's trying to get Scrabble about and get funds and all this, and we ended up with a wee contract for playing Orange Rocks. Right?
You sure you want this in?
Aye, absolutely. And of course, half of the band were mortified and just didn't want to know.
Uh-huh.
And the rest is sort of turned up. And it was one terrible experience from start to finish. But can I tell you, it was one of the occasions, I'm sure it was at the actual Orange Rock, it went out to Green or something like that, and there was no bass drummer, he just refused point blank to turn out. So we played as a pipe band that day with no bass drummer, so I've had that experience.
Well, it must have been the only band that ever played at a Northern Walk without a bass drum.
There's interesting, eh?
Another first. Well,
Right, I'm going to drag you away from that one. Joe, a couple of minutes, or a minute or whatever, a few words on Strasbourg playing in pipe bands.
well, Strasbourg playing in general, it's, I think, how I always look at Strasbourg is how I was taught to look at Strasbourg. And that was going all the way back to my first musical advisor in pipe bands, and that was Alec McCagan. And Alec always stressed on us about Strasbourg. It's a dance. It's a dance. He would do things, again, it makes you giggle in a way. You could always tell when he was wanting a smoke,
Right.
because he would wander in, no, he'd put your hand under your sticks and the drums and hitting off his hand, he'd just stop and the band stop. Joe, what's that you're playing? It's just a Strasbourg. Aye. What is a Strasbourg? It's a dance hall. Do you think you were playing, do you think people could dance to what you were playing there? I think so, Alec. Now I know you can do a paddy bar, this is the ultimate put down.
Okay.
Right, pipers, blow up, play that Strasbourg. Now Joe, put your drum down. Well, it's a dance right enough, you know, so you to learn to do that, and that's a way of getting it home to you. But my vision of him, you know, it's all those years ago, he was the guy who taught me about Strasbourg, and I watch some bands practicing and watch a pipe major with this finger going, you know, hitting the pulse and down, you know, this, you know, that's it, get it together, right there, and that's no Strasbourg.
Mm-hmm.
Alec was always this way, lift, you know, and that's what it is. It's just Strasbourg. You always had this imagining the dancer with the long sweep from one position to the other. That's the long note, and then the short notes with this, and this balance, but always the lift. It's quite simply, that's it, very simply, the way I would think this to be. I write in an awful lot of sheets, too many triplets.
Okay.
And there are triplets that are put in. I think it's the modern trend to play jigs. And quite often some of the jig scores they're trying to get them to play to fit into Strasbourg.
My goodness.
That's the impression you get. I know that I'm doing them the lads an injustice, that it's just the way it comes through to me. And they miss the, you know, try for me lift.
Do you like to hear open triplets or closed triplets?
Oh, there's a place for both. I mean,
Okay.
that's
Depending on the tune then?
Of course it does.
Yeah,
Depends
okay.
on the tune. And depends in the way, you know, it's this long notes, short notes, the way the tune is written, and they should always pay attention to the way the tune was written, what the man's ideas were. Give the composer a bit of respect, and think of the actual tune, you know. But that's a very simple way of doing it. As I mentioned to you again off camera, there was a fellow who had said to me not all that long ago about how Pipers'Persuasion was preserved.
Okay.
All those 100 years ago or whatever. They thought that they were losing Pipers'Persuasion, so that the Pipers'Persuasion Society was formed to preserve Pipers'Persuasion.
Okay.
And this fellow said to me, "Do you not think there's a good case for the March to Spain Deal Society?"
Absolutely.
And I mean, maybe that's a cry from the heart from a guy who's getting a bit frustrated listening to some of the stuff. But you know, that's a lot of what I've said would imply that we were better then than we are now, and that's not the case. That's just not the case. The players just now are technically much more
very, very high standard.
hugely.
But there's
Huge
always a case to
standard.
be made for constantly looking at what they're trying to achieve with the March of Spain.
That's right. You must always think musically before you think technically.
Yeah.
You know, and if you have the technical expertise to produce the musical effect, then well, you've got the package.
Didn't you win various championships with Renfrew built in that sort of ethos?
Well, yeah.
What did you win drumming wise with the Renfrew?
Well, my drum corps won everything. Scottish, British, European, Worlds and Carol titles. We got all of those titles. And personally, I won the World Solos on a couple of occasions. I think I had a run of something like 15, 16 years or something. I can't remember because I don't take a note of these things. Well, I was in the prize list all that time. But I only got it the 2 occasions. I would have given you all the other prizes for another first, you know. Firsts are always very important. But yeah, I had the distinction, I have the distinction of being the first winner of the official World Solo Drum Championship when it was first introduced as the World Solos. Prior to that, it was known as the SPBA, then became the RSPBA Challenge Trophy for Drummers, which we all refer to as the World Solos,
Yeah.
which it was.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't have the official title. So all these guys, they can win it as many times as they like, but I got it the first time.
Joe, I think I'm just going to call a halt there because it's getting dark.
It's getting dark.
It's nearly Wednesday.
And I'm waiting on another call for India.
That's correct. I thoroughly enjoyed the afternoon sitting here reminiscing. It's wonderful stuff for the viewers, and I'm quite sure that they'll enjoy this particular segment of Piper's Persuasion. And I must thank you very much, Joe, for your time and your effort and everything else this afternoon. And it's a joy to speak here. We could speak here for a week, I'm quite sure. You know?
Well, once the camera's off, we can get the
Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you.
Joe Noble.
Thank you.